Now, according to most reports, the Chinese government's attempt to cover up the coronavirus is largely responsible for the virus's current spread. But in spite of mounting evidence, Chinese government officials are trying to fight allegations that they're to blame. In fact, they're even going as far as blaming the West for spreading it to them. So how is this happening? Joining us to discuss is Dr. Ori Sela, head of the Department of East Asian Studies at Tel Aviv University. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, let's start talking about the source of the coronavirus. There are rumors about it being developed in Chinese government labs. There are other rumors about food markets in Wuhan. What excuse is the Chinese government currently providing for the virus?
Good afternoon. First, I wouldn't use the term excuses because this issue is much more complex. What I would say is that what we see now going on in the world is a battle of narratives over the question of the origin, over the question of how countries were or were not prepared for such a pandemic, as well as to the actual measures taken by different countries. In time, we'll see these battles raging over the exit strategies. So as far as China is concerned, the different narratives that it manufactured or spread since, let's say, January, were changing over time. So, for example, in January, the main issue for the Chinese government was to contain the rumors, what the Chinese government saw as rumors. How effective
it was and where it had come from.
Yeah, the issue then was not the question of how effective it was, but the issue was to contain in the narratives, in the media and the social media, to contain the rumors that for the Chinese government were conceived as dangerous and as problematic. Later on, when we moved from January to February, and as the Chinese government saw that the pandemic is much more serious, then the narratives that were coming from China were trying to pinpoint the blame on the local government rather than the central government. And later on, as China was beginning to move further in its exit strategy, so-called, in the middle and late February, then the issue was to show that China was actually handling it very well, and that the so-called China model for coping with the virus was the most effective one, and hence also that the Chinese government model was the most effective one. Then in March, and as media in the world also began focusing on China and accusing it for the spread of the virus, then we saw various types of new narratives coming out of China trying to actually say that the virus came from the US, came from Italy, came from the U.S. Army, various types of narratives.
Well, speaking of the United States, we're seeing reports now that Missouri is trying to sue the Chinese government, and specifically the Communist government of China, the Communist Party in China, for damages over this virus. How do you think international relations with China are going to be affected right now and in the future?
Well, first of all, here in Israel, you don't need to go as far as Missouri. We have this kind of a lawsuit in Herzliya. So it's here as well. In any case, to your main question, the relationship between mostly China and the U.S., these are the major powers that we're talking about, before the corona were not, they were not a happy couple. We saw the so-called trade war. Then in December, there were news about the trade war being over. It was not over. There was a treaty that was signed, but it didn't mean too much.
Sure.
And in other words, what we see in during the corona and what we will see in the post-corona is the same trade war being exacerbated, being magnified, but it will still, in my opinion, will not be something that is comparable to the Cold War or stuff like that. China and the U.S. are intimately integrated in economy and relations in very many ways. So the question would be, how will they be able to get along? And for smaller countries, how to maneuver themselves so that they don't get hit when the storm goes by.
All right, Dr. Sela, thank you so much for joining us.